Hi everyone. Welcome. Good evening. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a couple of minutes. We're going to give it a few to let other folks log on. In the meantime, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat and what faith community you're with, and where you're calling in from, feel free to do that. But we'll give it just a couple more minutes to let some other folks hop on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here. Kevin, you all are in Annapolis, right? Ish. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm in Crofton, Annapolis area.
Okay. Good to meet you. And Vincenzo is here from Grace Fellowship and Timonium. Thanks for
Hi,
being
how are you?
here. Good to meet everyone. And Hillary from Cross Point Church in Salisbury. Hillary, I didn't realize that you all had such an awesome solar array on your roof. That was so cool to see. Okay, well, we might have a few more folks join us, and I'll let them in as needed from the waiting room. But I think let's just go ahead and get started. We're recording this so we can send it out to everyone, both everyone who's here and folks that aren't here, because there's a list of about 170, 180 different congregations around the state that are covered by this law. And so we're really hoping this will be a good resource for both you all and just everyone moving forward. Hi everyone. My name is Maddie Smith. My pronouns are they, them. I am from Interfaith Power and Light, DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia. And we are a local nonprofit that specializes in working with basically what we do is grassroots organizing with faith communities like you all, specifically focused around climate and environment. So we do a lot of things such as supporting green team or leadership development within houses of worship. We also do some faith-based advocacy at the state and local levels. Um, and then my role specifically as clean energy shepherd at Interfaith Power and Light is like my job is to help you all with these things and beyond. So what I do a lot is I meet with congregations and talk to them about how to save them money and energy, whether that be solar or doing some energy efficiency upgrades to your building. And then also, sort of one of the things that's popped up in the last couple of years for us is compliance with state or local benchmarking and building energy performance standards laws. And so I've become a little bit of a like sort of energy benchmarking social worker for houses of worship. So, you know, saying all that to say that we're here to help you, like that's what my job is, and that we also have some experts here today from the state who are going to talk through everything that's required and what you need to know. So basically, today's webinar is going to be an info session and a training, and that training is going to be provided by Sam Furio from the Maryland Department of the Environment, and then Rebecca Price from the Maryland Energy Administration. And before I hand things off to both of them. I just want to say a couple of things that today, we're here to learn about how to comply with the Maryland State energy benchmarking law, and then um, and things that go along with that. But that it's also important to know that this law is now on the books in Maryland, because like our state is really leading on climate policy. And that the point of that is not to make, burdensome requirements for you all, but the point is really to save you energy and money on things that then you can use for the mission of your communities. I'm sure everybody would love to, be spending a lot less money on utility bills that you could put towards, the mission of your community. Um, so back in this law passed as part of the Climate Solutions Now Act in 2022 in the Maryland General Assembly, which was a big sort of omnibus climate bill that included a lot of different things, not just this specific provision that we'll be talking about today. And there was a lot of faith community support, including there, had been a last minute effort on the, I can't remember if it was the House or Senate floor, but there was a effort, at the last second to try to exempt houses of worship. And, we said no, like houses of worship want to be part of the solution and they want to like get access to resources that will help them save money and energy in the long term. I have just a couple slides to share from that time. Let me get my tabs correct. Okay. So here's just a few back in the day throwback tweets. Oops, that's the last one. And so like there was a lot of faith community advocacy to try to get this big climate bill across the board, including folks from the Catholic community, who are really speaking out because Laudato Si, one of the Pope's encyclicals, like really is calling Catholics to be a part of this work together. And then, also the fact that, yes, the law requires people to do things, but there are people that can help, like us and like me. Like, that's what we're here for, is because this law exists. Like, I'm here to help it work for you and help you do what you have to do to comply. And like that support I'm providing for houses of worship is at no cost. And like, we all know that our faith communities are leaders in the community and like do so much good work, and that they like that you all want to be, the example that's set forth. Here's Delegate C.T. Wilson talking about, his own church and community as part of this work. This, I guess, yeah, this is back when everybody was probably wearing masks on the house floor. Okay. And so, as we move into this next phase of like implementing this law that passed, I like this will require gathering information about your facility and then patiently navigating an online system for entering it. And like I said, we're recording today's webinar with the expectation that you may go back, and look at some of the details, pause it as needed, and then come back to it, when you have everything gathered. I'll also just say that, there's similar requirements in place in DC and Montgomery County, Maryland, and that over the past year, I've helped about 50 different faith communities navigate those similar requirements, and so have learned a lot about, exactly what's easiest for faith communities to do this. And yeah, and have gotten pretty good at helping folks with this. And so we're going to do this together, and I'm, yeah, really excited to help you all with it. And so with that, I think I'm going to pass it over to Sam and Rebecca. And please, if you have questions during the session, please feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it and can, raise things with Sam and Rebecca as needed. And then we'll also have lots of time at the end for questions as well. So I'll pass it to you, Sam and Rebecca. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Maddie. And good evening, everyone. My name is Sam Furio. I'm the outreach coordinator for the building decarbonization team at the Maryland Department of the Environment. Just give me 1 second while I figure out my screen sharing situation here. Maddie, can you see those screens? That screen. All right. Well, yeah, before diving in, just want to say, well, good evening. Thanks for joining an evening webinar. And thanks to Interfaith Power and Light for hosting this and inviting Becky and I to speak with you this evening. We really appreciate IPL's continued support for faith communities in Maryland, and they provide really awesome assistance that is, in navigating a lot of technical programs. And so that's a great resource, and hopefully this evening we can help you understand more about the requirements under BEPS and how IPL can help you navigate them. So again, I'm the outreach coordinator for the building decarbonization team. Our team is responsible for implementing the building energy performance standards and some other proposed decarbonization policies for the state of Maryland. So tonight I'm going to give you a pretty general overview of the policy requirements and do some demos on some of our software tools. But if you require more in-depth information than what I provide this evening, you can find really all you need to know about the policy and relevant resources on the website, which you can get to via the QR code on the left side of the screen. If you can't get your phone up fast enough, no problem. MD BEPS in Google. We are the top of the list now, so that's exciting. You can just search that and see all you need to know. We are hosting a lot of outreach sessions and webinars as a part of our working group processes and to assist in implementation of the regulation. And we also have some general email lists that you can sign up through the QR code on the right side of the screen or also through our website. And in general, if you have questions beyond the materials you read or beyond the presentation this evening, you can always contact us via BEPS.MDE@maryland.gov at the bottom of the screen, or give us a call at 410-537-3183. And you'll probably get me on the other end of those contact pieces. So I look forward to speaking with you. So what we're going to talk about for BEPS this evening is background of the policy, what's a covered building or a building that needs to comply with the regulation, what owners of these covered buildings need to know, the performance standards portion of building energy performance standards and the targets building owners or buildings will have to hit. We're going to do a live demo of the BEPS portal. We're also going to talk about some resources and where IPL can step in to help you with these next steps for BEPS. So as Maddie said, the Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022 requires some pretty aggressive greenhouse gas emission reductions for the state of Maryland. They're 60% by 2031 and net zero by 2045 compared to 2006 levels. So they're pretty strong goals. And as Maddie said, implementing BEPS was just one of the requirements under the Climate Solutions Now Act. So MDE is required to implement BEPS to help meet these reductions. And if you're just curious about where the state's going to meet these goals, you can read about the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan on MDE's website today. And that talks about BEPS and a whole suite of other policies. So kind of BEPS in one slide. So what does it aim to do and who's impacted by it? So I'm starting from the left. It aims to reduce emissions from Maryland's large building sector. And it aims to reduce energy costs for Marylanders and also improve indoor and outdoor air quality for Marylanders. So as Maddie said, BEPS is now in effect for the state of Maryland. It was finalized on December 23rd, 2024. And the buildings that need to comply are buildings larger than 35,000 square feet, excluding any parking garage area. So these are pretty big buildings. 35,000 square feet, think of a Safeway or your giant grocery store. That's typically around 40,000 square feet. So that's the size you should think of when you're picturing these buildings. These covered buildings must annually submit a benchmarking report starting this year to the department that comprises the energy use for the building. And so every year, these reports for the energy use are going to be due by June 1st. But since it's the first year of the requirements, people are still getting used to it. They're still hearing about it. The deadline for submitting your benchmarking reports has been pushed to September 1st. So all reports in by September 1st will be considered. And then 5 years down the road, starting in 2030, as I said, we're aiming to reduce emissions from the large buildings in Maryland. These buildings are going to have to meet phased emissions targets. And then if they don't meet the targets, they'll pay for excess emissions over the targets. So again, what do these covered buildings look like in the state? Well, we model there's over 9,000 buildings in the state that need to comply with BEPS or covered under BEPS. And you can see some property types on the screen. The majority of these buildings fall into warehouse categories, office spaces, multifamily housing, and retail stores. And where are these covered buildings throughout the state? Well, they're absolutely everywhere. They're in every county in the state, but they're predominantly along I-95 between, excuse me, Baltimore and DC. So big screen, there's a lot of stuff on the screen. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So as I said, buildings greater than 35,000 square feet, excluding any parking garage area, are considered covered buildings and need to comply. Now, there's some buildings that are eligible to be totally exempt from the requirements. So those are buildings designated as historic by state, federal, or local law, public and non-public elementary and secondary schools, manufacturing buildings, agricultural buildings, demolished buildings, and federally owned buildings. They're all eligible to be totally exempt from BEPS. On the right side of the screen, there are some exemptions for annual exemptions. So there's payment that can be made for excess emissions over the targets starting in 2030. So providers of affordable housing or naturally occurring affordable housing can apply to receive reduced payments. There's an annual exemption that can be applied for buildings experiencing financial distress, and also buildings with low or no occupancy, and they can be applied for annually. So let's say you are determining, you're working with Maddie, you're figuring out your building square footage, you're getting all your blueprints together, and you determine your building's over 35,000 square feet. It's going to need to comply with BEPS. It doesn't fall into one of those exemptions I mentioned. There are some energy use exclusions you can exclude from your benchmarking reports in Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So energy use associated with food service facilities, electric vehicle charging, the heating of outdoor pools, parking lots, combustion equipment if it's required to run on combustible fuels by a state or federal law, and then those other exclusions specifically for Energy Star Portfolio Manager that can be made. If your building has some of that equipment, it can be excluded out, and we have guidance on that. And Maddie is well versed in Energy Star Portfolio Manager and can help if you guys need to start benchmarking. So I just threw a lot of stuff at you, but I think breaking this down into just a to-do list for building owners. First things first, I just want to reiterate, if you're just hearing about BEPS for the first time, you're not behind the times at all. There's a lot to learn about BEPS. If it's confusing, totally understand. You can reach out to us or IPL with questions on the policy, and we'll make sure we work to answer any of your questions. But first things first, you're going to determine if you're a covered building. You're going to get your accurate property characteristics, determine if you meet the size threshold. Let's say you meet that size threshold. You're going to search in this BEPS portal that we're going to go through later. and search the covered buildings list, we call it. It's our best shot at mapping all the buildings in the state that will need to comply with BEPS. And you know, if you're going to go for an exemption, submit any relevant forms. Second thing, and most important, start benchmarking. So, you know, this year, as I said, first year of requirements, people are working out the kinks. Everyone's hearing about it. It's like a trial run year. You're just going to start benchmarking. And then for 5 years, all you're going to have to do is submit energy data to the department. And that's all you got to do for 5 years. But once you start benchmarking, you're going to be able to see how your buildings are performing. So you're going to see how much they're emitting and how efficiently they're using energy. And if you're not meeting the targets, then you can plan to make improvements to your building and determine when it's preferable to pay for those excess emissions that I mentioned. So what do the performance standards look like? So I mentioned 5 years, you're just going to be benchmarking your data. Well, 2030, the performance portion comes of this, where this regulation comes in. And so just before we get into them, we like to say that building owners have a long runway. I've said this a couple times now, but there's 5 years where you're just benchmarking. And then there is the performance standards take shape as a phase reduction of direct emissions from the site of the building. So what does that mean? That is basically just concerning the combustion equipment on site of the building. So what's burning fossil fuels? And so this phase reduction is a 3-phase reduction. So let's say you're a church and you're going against one of the church emissions targets. There's going to be interim standard 1. That's going to be 2030 to 2034. That's going to be the highest allotment of emissions for each property type. So a church has a different emissions target than an office space or a multifamily building or a warehouse, for example. Interim standard 2 is going to come in 2035 to 2039. It's going to reduce that allotment of emissions. Again, we're trying to guide everyone to lower amounts of emissions. And then in 2040 and beyond, all buildings, regardless of property type, hospitals, churches, multifamily housing, are required to meet net zero direct emissions from the site. So I know that sounds like a lot. We model that 1/3 of the covered buildings in the state are already meeting the final standard of net zero. So it's possible that when you start benchmarking, maybe you do it on your own, maybe you work with Maddie to do it, your building's already at net zero and you don't have to make any improvements for your emissions. It's possible that when you start benchmarking, you're meeting interim standard 2 or interim standard 1. And so that runway, as we call it, gets longer and longer. And it's worth noting that we do intend to adopt an energy efficiency standard alongside this emissions standard. So how efficiently you're using energy on site. And this metric's called Site Energy Use Intensity, or EUI. And we had aimed to adopt that in 2027. So as you are looking at your properties, thinking about what equipment you might need to install, we'd recommend not installing any inefficient electric equipment. So I just did a pretty brief overview of the requirements, what building owners need to do, the performance standards portion. And I want to go into kind of the relationship between building owners and MDE, how you get data to us, and how you figure out if you're a covered building or not. So there's kind of 2 software tools here in play here. We're going to do a live demo of one tonight, but the one tool that you're going to submit your data through and submit your benchmarking reports through is Energy Star Portfolio. That is an EPA tool. It's free. It's tried and true. It's used all over the country. You'll load your energy data into there and share it with MDE, and we'll download it. There's a second piece to this relationship, and that's the BEPS portal. And that is a MDE software tool that we developed to house the list of covered buildings. So again, our best shot at which buildings will need to comply with BEPS. So if you want to view the covered buildings list, you're going to go to the BEPS portal. If you think you're eligible for one of those exemptions, or even if you want to exclude some of those energy uses I mentioned, like the food service facilities or parking lots, you can submit all your forms and things like that via the BEPS portal. So that's kind of your direct link with MDE on forms and communications like that. So without further ado, let's see if this works. Oh, I already screwed up. I'm going to try and go to a different screen. I hope it doesn't blow everything up, but we'll see. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. Can you see this screen? Should be a web page. All right, cool. All right, so let's say you go to Google and you search MD BEPS. Again, it's gonna be the first thing that pops up. Oh, you're going to land on the Building Energy Performance Standards webpage. Now, if you want to see the covered buildings list, you're going to click on this big yellow image at the top. It says BEPS portal and next steps, click here. Now, can you see the second web page? Great. Okay, things are working. That's awesome. So now we're on the Building Energy Performance Standards Getting Started page. So you're going to find on this page basically a lot of things I just talked about, kind of the high level overview of the requirements, but also figuring out if you're a building that's covered or exempt, how you can determine that, and kind of your next steps, depending on which pathway is right for you, covered or exempt. So you're going to scroll down on this whole thing, and then there's a big button that says Enter Portal, click here. We're really taking you on the runaround. So you click that button. Now you're in the BEPS portal. This is where the covered buildings list is housed. So you are now in the BEPS portal. You'll see this search bar here for the database and a bunch of rows and filters down here. This is the list. And you can access this as of this evening or tomorrow, whenever you want, and type in your building address and see if it's on the list. So this is going to be constantly updating. So, you know, keep tabs of the covered buildings list. I will note, there's a caveat for the covered buildings list. Again, it's our best shot at mapping over 9,000 buildings that will need to comply with BEPS. So it's very possible that your building meets the requirements of a covered building and it's not on the list, or your building does not meet the requirements of a covered building and it is on the list. So there's a lot of different data sources going into this database, and things get a little wonky sometimes. So I just want to walk you through what you would do in each of those scenarios. So let's say your church or faith organization building is under 35,000 square feet, but it's on the list. That does not mean you're a covered building. All it means is you need to just submit a form to us that says, hey, my building's on here and it's doesn't meet the size requirements. We'll review it with any supporting information you have, and then if it's determined to not be a covered building, we'll remove it from the list. If you are a covered building and you're not on the list, so this is the caveat is you'll need to comply whether or not you're on the list, or if you receive notification by the department. If you meet the definition, you're going to have to work on BEPS. So if you think your building should be on there, there is a link up here that says if your building is not listed, click here to request to add your building. And I know this is looking like a lot of stuff here, and it's not the most attractive portal, but if you click on this link, it's going to take you to a login page. I might have to create an account. still have to create an account to submit any form. Oh, that's taking up. So you can click on that. You submit any information you have on your building, its characteristics, and we'll review it. And we'll say, okay, this building meets the requirements. We'll add it to the covered buildings list, and we'll make a unique ID for it. So Maddie can help you with all of that form navigation. I know it's, this might be a little overwhelming at this point. I'm throwing a lot at you, but Maddie can help submit these forms for you. So let's say your building's on here. I'm going to search building here in Baltimore City. And once your building's on here, you're going to see the entry on the covered buildings list. And you're going to see the UBID, the unique building identifier for your building. Now, this is a pretty crucial point. You're going to want to keep note of this UBID because it's going to have to go alongside your building and portfolio manager. This is kind of an MDE number that we use to keep track of the building and keep track of it between softwares. So keep note of that. Now, let's say you want to submit a form. You're going to click on these blue clipboards. It's not obvious, but the blue clipboards are clickable. You click on them. It'll take you to, I want to submit a form for this building. You say add new form. And then, whoa, a whole bunch of forms pop up. So this is forms that go alongside all those exemptions and exclusions I mentioned earlier. So historic buildings, school buildings, manufacturing buildings. So you can find whichever form you want that's eligible for your building. And you click on that blue clipboard again, and it'll have you submit it to our compliance team, and they'll make a determination based on what you submitted if you're either exempt or removed from the list or et cetera. So that is how you'll submit forms. Again, Maddie can help you with submitting these forms and, getting any information you need to make a request. But for now, that's how you see the covered buildings list. And let me just see if I can get back to another screen without ruining. Okay. So that's how you see the covered buildings list. I just want to be cognizant of time here. Okay, I think so back in the slides, Maddie, can you see the slide? Gotcha. Okay. So I think a couple forms that are going to be relevant for you all. This is just a snapshot of that list I just took you through on the portal. So I know that sometimes churches, faith-based organizations, and their buildings have maybe school property uses. Maybe there's schooling happening on site, or it's joined with a school, and you guys have some, mixed uses there. I just note that. So first things first, if the answer at the end of the day is if you think your building has these school uses and is eligible for this public and non-public elementary and secondary school exclusion, you can submit this school building form to us, and our compliance program will make a determination based off what you submit. So that's if you think you're eligible for that exemption, just submit that form to us, and we'll work through the characteristics you submit. I will note that daycare and pre-K are not exempt under the definition of schools. So it's public and non-public elementary and secondary schools. And then again, this under 35,000 square feet form. I've gotten call from some churches in the past. They've received letters in the mail from different parties saying you might be covered by BEPS. And at the end of the day, their church is only 10,000 square feet, something. And so, I think getting an accurate square footage is a great first step, seeing where you sit compared to this 35,000 square feet. And if you're under it, all you got to do, well, if you're under it and you're not on the list, you don't have to do anything. If you're under it and you're on the list, all we need you to do is submit that form and we'll get you removed. So I know that was a whole lot.
Yeah, Sam, can I ask a question? Thank you. That's super helpful. I know we definitely have at least one person on this call who's from a church slash school. Linda, is it all one building that you all share at St. Martin's? Oh, you're muted, Linda, if you're trying to say something.
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, it's all in one building. It's 48,400 square feet.
So, Sam, is there like a cutoff percentage for like how much of your building has to be a school for it to like be determined to be school usage? Or is it just that like if it's determined that 35,000 square feet is sort of used for school use, then they'd be on the list?
Right. Yeah, there's nothing in the regulation about, specific amounts of each building dedicated to each use. Again, I would just refer you to this form and, if this building comprises, the school uses for public and non-public elementary and secondary, we would just need you to submit the form and it says, hey, Linda's building has, this much square footage devoted to this type of schooling and this much square footage devoted to the church or, faith-based practices, et cetera. Once you submit that, our compliance team will review and then you'll get a determination from the compliance team. So I know that's not the exact answer that you might want to hear. There's a lot of buildings in the state and they all have really unique circumstances. And so a lot of this is going to come down to our compliance program needing to review each submission and making a determination, case by case. So, I would just suggest work with Maddie, ask us any questions you have about relevant materials you might have to submit. But you can submit that school exemption form and we'll work to make a determination.
Okay, thank you. I'll probably be reaching out to you, Maddie.
Any other questions? I know I blabbed a lot and I haven't been able to see. Oh, there is things happening in the chat. Okay. Oh, maybe not.
Yeah, another question that I have. So let's say one church has a school, and then let's say in 5 years the school, it won't exist anymore at the church, and is above the 35,000. So they need they need to comply with the law when that changes. So how they communicate that? So they need to communicate it. So how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, yeah, it would just be having to communicate back with us about, hey, we had this eligible school exemption use on site, and that since has been removed, and now we're predominantly, faith-based practices or any other practices that happen on site that aren't exempt. And so at that point, the building would then be ushered back into, having to meet the requirements of the regulation because it doesn't fall into an exempt type anymore.
So then they will need to comply. Let's say it's in 2040. So then they will have a big step to apply. To comply with the law that for the requirement that will be in that year, or there will be kind of transition so for them. So
Yeah, that's a good question too. It, um, when our compliance program would take note of when you maybe fell out of the exemption definition, and where we are in the compliance timeline with BEPS and kind of where you are sitting at that time, and make a determination there. I can't say specifically again at this time, but that would be the process for that. Thanks for those questions. And
Can I ask one more question, Sam? So
yep.
this question about food service facility. So I know some congregations have like pretty big kitchens that serve food. Like, is a kitchen in your community that you're not selling food from, does that therefore not qualify as a food service facility? Or like what's sort of the delineation there?
Yeah. If you have a commercial kitchen on site, or you're preparing food for uh, you know community gatherings in the building, that energy use can be excluded from your profile. And so
Okay, and then so how do folks often go about measuring that? Because for most congregations, I imagine they just have one electric meter. Sometimes they have more than one.
yeah. So depending on how you're metered, if there's some different guidance on each style of metering, and I'm send out a benchmarking guide later that gives you the guidance on each one. But let's say you're separately metered, like that kitchen has its own meter, and all the gas and electric use are on its own meters for that kitchen's use. That you can just, when you submit your energy use to us, you just omit all of that. You act like it doesn't even exist. It's off the record. And it's not even part of your building's profile. And if you're sub-metered, that means that use is then combined with use from the rest of the building. So basically, if you talk with Maddie about portfolio manager, they'll go into portfolio manager and back that commercial kitchen use out with a negative meter. So it just subtracts it, but it's part of the whole building. And then if you don't have any metering, if you're all on one meter for the building, there's an estimation we'll provide for the characteristics of the kitchen on how much energy use can be excluded from your profile. So there's different steps based on how you're metering. I'm sure everyone's got different styles of metering, and but there's guidance for each style. So let me see. Just want to make sure. So just if there's no more questions, I'm just going to funnel through these last few slides here. Again, just reiterating how you're going to get started. Figuring out your accurate property characteristics. And if you determine you're going to have to meet the BEPS requirements, you're going to start annually benchmarking and submitting these reports using Energy Star Portfolio Manager starting this year. And then once you see your output, you're going to be able to assess how your building's performing compared to the targets and if changes are need to be made. And then you're going to achieve the targets or standards or opt to pay for any excess emissions over the standards. And so, we've been running a lot of outreach sessions throughout 2024, and they're going to continue running a lot of these throughout 2025. If you've missed any of our outreach sessions or working groups, you can find our YouTube playlist linked on our website today. We've got almost 20 hours of video content on there you can watch today about BEPS and benchmarking and things that are relevant for you. And I would also note that we have some office hours that just started last week. And so you can schedule 20-minute blocks with our team. If you have any questions about, your building specifics, or, hey, we've got this weird metering here, how do we do this? XYZ. So I can make sure to get you the link for those office hours. And, I look forward to hopefully talking with you guys there. And Maddie's also a great resource for, those questions as well. We have the benchmarking guide and guidance and connecting with your energy data provider, which, is something I haven't really talked about yet. But let's say I saw some of you are in Timonium, Annapolis. You might have BG&E as your provider, or Petco or whoever else might be down south. There's specific guidance for each utility on getting your energy data. So if you're a BG&E customer and you need to get your energy data for your building, there's guidance on how to make this request to BG&E for your meters. And I think Maddie can help you make those requests as well to BG&E. But this cuts out a big step, is BG&E will then just load your data right into Portfolio Manager for you. And then you can just submit it onto us. And so, you don't have to enter your bills or, things like that. This is an automated process for these larger utilities like BG&E. And so BG&E and all the utilities have 90 days to provide your data upon request in 2025, and 30 days to provide it every year after. So, I just want to remind everyone, we have that deadline of September 1st for this year. So you don't want to request too late from BG&E because that 90 days might run you past September 1st. So try and get your requests in on or before June 1st of this year to BG&E to get your 2024 data. That's the data we're looking for. And again, if you're looking to get involved with Energy Star Portfolio Manager and you need to benchmark, it's a free tool. There's great free trainings online about all different types of buildings and setups. And Maryland's got a lot of buildings with unique architecture. And so, Portfolio Manager has great insights on a lot of that. And that's that from me. So, again, if you have any questions beyond what I know I threw a lot at you, reach out to us at the email and contact info on the screen. And Maddie's really well versed in a lot of this stuff, so they are a great resource for you as well. But with that, I just want to say thanks for having us again, and I'll pass it to Becky, unless Maddie, if you wanted to do a transition or anything.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I'll just say that, as people start figuring out Portfolio Manager, I'm more than happy to help. I'll put a link in the chat at the end of how to book an appointment with me, and most of you probably have my email. And so we can always just walk through everything. But yeah, looking forward to hearing Becky share some, other money and resources for folks.
Really quickly though, did folks have any more questions for Sam?
Well, the question that I have is basically, I mean, the first time is just to gather information, right? So this is not really any penalty, anything, but is it really okay? Where I mean, just to understand a baseline, right? And then we can go from there. So right, so this is a kind of a okay.
Exactly. Yeah. This year isn't even really establishing a baseline. This year is, we just want everyone to get used to submitting data, what it looks like, practice getting your data from BG&E, things like that. So getting all of the channels set up so that next year, when you submit your data, we're going to establish your baseline off of your 2025 data that you submit in 2026. So I know that's a little confusing in the wording, but this first year of reports is we're working out the kinks together, and there's no performance standards to be met.
I see. So for example, in our building, we just got a grant from a BG&E and we changed all so the lighting and so the office and all around the building. So these are so I guess this is all already in that direction, right? So this is kind of what I'm thinking. So, but the other question that I have, with all this, I mean, with the new administration, so they are not that inclined toward the green and all this stuff. So I mean, is that something that is a kind of we don't know what's going to happen in the future, even though we have a law now, but we have seen that a lot of laws have been out of the window. So this is my question is, so if this is something that will still be available, because we'll be looking also to install solar. I mean, because all the so the the benefits. But my question is, I mean, is it something that is still going to be there? So because what is happening in DC. So
Yeah,
Sure.
that's a great question, Vincenzo. I mean, we're getting that question a lot, and I imagine Sam and Becky are too. I mean, the good thing is that state policy is driving a lot of the incentives that are available that Becky's going to be talking about in just a second. And so, like,
Great
the federal
segue.
government can't do anything about that, which is great. A lot of the solar policy, there is the federal tax credit. I won't blab a lot about it right now. We think that's safer than a lot of the different things right now. Most of what makes solar possible for houses of worship is state policy too, and so that's really great to hear. I'd love to chat more with you about solar for the church. Just really quick before we pass it to Becky. So Hillary asked a question in the chat. Is there any benefit to buildings with solar panels? So like their church, I know, has this great big awesome solar array on the roof. Um, how does that help them or not help them comply with BEPS? And like what are they required to do for their benchmarking?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So the I said that the performance standards that's active in the regulation right now is the emissions performance standard, and it's concerned with your combustion on site. So your boilers and your furnaces, they're combusting fossil fuels, for heating and other things. So renewables are not eligible for or applicable for your BEPS performance in that regard, because your solar panels that you're installing on the building are not reducing the combustion on site from the other equipment that's combusting fuel. So I know that's a little confusing, but um, I'll say it this way as well. So a building that has no gas equipment on site, no combustion equipment on site, um, and there's a couple caveats regarding if you're connected to a district energy system, which I don't think you guys are. But if you have no combustion equipment on site, you'll be meeting that net zero standard in 2040 because you're not emitting anything from you no longer have any emissions from that equipment. So in that regard, the electricity is emissions free, and that is why a solar array does not have any impact on your performance in BEPS and for that. So that was
Can I just add something really quickly?
yeah.
For those who are, maybe advocates in Annapolis, there is a bill that is active in Annapolis right now before the General Assembly that MDE and MEA both kind of collaborated on that is proposing to make a couple amendments to the BEPS policy to make it more flexible for building owners. And one of the main things that bill would do, if enacted, would be to allow for on-site renewables to help kind of counteract. So, write your legislatures if you're interested in that. So we won't know till I guess April if that
Got
passes.
it. Okay, that makes good sense. Hillary, I'll be in touch with you about that. But Sam, if folks have, to figure out their total energy usage, folks will still need to benchmark their like solar meter information, right?
Yeah, so we'll need your the total on-site generation from the panel system, and there's forgive me if I misspeak. There's specific guidance on benchmarking on-site renewables in the benchmarking guide, which I'll drop in the chat
Yeah.
here.
And I can
But
just add that, so what I've discovered from helping folks in DC where there's a lot of solar is that the benchmarking can be a little bit tricky. And so I am super happy to help with that for anybody that does have solar. And yeah, so Hillary, I'll be in touch. We can work on that together. Okay, Becky, please go ahead, I think.
Just sharing my slides. Can you guys see that? So yes, awesome. Okay, hope everyone is still energized and with us. Hi everyone, my name is Becky Price and I'm with the Maryland Energy Administration. Sam just went through a lot of like really meaty stuff. So I kind of want to condense my presentation down a bit. I really hope that this motivates you to get your building data in order. And the stuff I'm talking about today is funding and financing, which is super, super important, but that's a little bit kind of that's the second step. So you don't need to take notes. Funding and financing is fluid. Mechanisms, measures are always changing. So I just want to I hope your takeaway is that there is money in the state, kind of to, was it Vincenzo's question earlier, like, do we have funding? Yes, we do have funding in Maryland. We're very lucky. And I just want to give you kind of a taste of the options we have. So it's kind of what I hope the takeaway is. Kind of quick and dirty agenda, what I'm going to run through today or tonight. MEA 101. So what the Maryland Energy Administration is, what we do, our role in the clean energy transition, whether that's for BEPS or for other, if you're a smaller congregation below that BEPS threshold, how we're supporting building energy performance BEPS implementation. Programs that can be leveraged for BEPS compliance or just clean energy measures from MEA, as well as other funding sources to consider in the state of Maryland. And then kind of rounding it out, sort of a preview of the Maryland. Oh, I think I'm using old slides. Oh, okay, whatever. Preview of an initiative called the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. So we are Maryland's friendly state energy office, and we have a goal of advancing Maryland's clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals, which we do through both policy and programmatic initiatives. We're able to chip away at this mission by dispensing funds to households, businesses, local governments, nonprofits, manufacturing entities, schools, kind of, the whole gamut, from a pot of money known as the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. You may hear that fund being called the SEIF, kind of cutely. This fund is where alternative compliance payments from various policies in Maryland goes. I just want to be transparent about where that money is coming from. That money is not tied in any way, shape, or form to the federal government. So there are Maryland policies that folks are, paying compliance payments if they're not meeting them, and then it's going into this pot that grows. So each year we dispense this money via grants, rebates, and loans through like over 20 incentive programs that are spanning the entire clean energy ecosystem. So microgrids, offshore wind, electric vehicles, and of course, building decarbonization, which I believe is why we are all here today. So unfortunately, like we at MEA can't fund the entirety of the clean energy transition here in Maryland. We have money, but it's not that much money. But what we do want to do is help jumpstart the market by defraying some of the upfront costs of, for example, pursuing a deep retrofit of a building or just to use another example, if you want to have charging infrastructure in your building, help defray some of those costs. I'll get into the specifics of some of our relevant programs in a second, but generally know that we're not typically funding 100% of the cost of a project. Kind of, again, that jump starting the market. So we require grantees in most cases to front some of the bill, do a cost share with us. So that could be a loan, use utility rebates. I know someone said they used a BG&E rebate for lighting just a few seconds ago, or their capital budgets. And I'll later in the presentation get into kind of examples of this. I do just like the way a colleague framed kind of MEA's role or what have you in a presentation recently. He said that MEA wants to buy your greenhouse gas emissions, and I liked that framing. He said to consider a grant application as your sales proposal, and the grant agreement should MEA choose to fund it as MEA's purchase order. So I just think that's a nice way of thinking about all of this. Kind of quickly, like how our grant and loan process works. It's not always clear to a layman, as I've learned. So our fiscal calendar over at the state begins in July, so July 1st. And our grant process kind of follows that calendar rather than the January to December calendar. So we typically launch grant programs in the late fall via we'll let folks know that a funding opportunity announcement or FOA has been released. And we'll keep a grant program open for about 90 days and then close it in the spring. So that said, we're kind of at the tail end of our fiscal year 25 grant season right now, unfortunately, if you were interested in applying for something. Then a panel of MEA staff weighs the applications against the criteria and deliberates which projects to fund, making a decision before the end of the fiscal year on the 31st of June. Funding, important to know, is paid in arrears, meaning we will reimburse expenses after they are paid. So like I said, a grant program is launched when MEA releases these funding opportunity announcements. Like I said, we've got, 25 programs at MEA. We are working on kind of shrinking that and kind of consolidating programs, but they're not all launched on the same day, not even sometimes on the same month. So up until now, it's been like stakeholders kind of have to keep their ears and eyes to the ground as to when we're launching these. So the FOA details the kind of total funding that MEA has for that program in a given fiscal year. Do note that our funding does fluctuate depending on how much money that pot of money I mentioned, the CEF has. The FOA will also detail the type of measures that the grant program will fund that year. Not profound advice by any means, but I do want to hammer home that it's extremely important to read the FOA carefully. Each FOA is different. And note that each grant program is staffed by a dedicated program manager who their job is to be of service to you. So if you're interested in applying to a program, feel empowered to reach out to the grant program manager. So each program has its own dedicated page on MEA's website, and at the bottom it'll say the name of the program manager, their email, sometimes even their phone number. Sometimes they'll host office hours during the application period to answer questions. Sometimes they won't. It's kind of just up to you if you want to talk shop. Email them, set up a time if you want to, ask them, hey, I'm thinking about applying to your program. I'm not sure if this is, what do you think about this kind of general application? They'll give you feedback. And kind of the last bit on MEA's grant programs, kind of a writ large, high level. Our incentives are dynamic. We've got an incredible amount of flexibility. Well, in some senses. So we listen to the market and adjust our programs each year accordingly. So, if maybe there's a certain aspect of building decarbonization that we're ignoring or not funding enough, let us know, and we can, as we're planning for the next fiscal year, we can, fine tune things. No promises, but I do just want folks to know it's dynamic. Okay, so energy efficiency and electrification, aka what I call state BEPS aligned programs. So presumably you may be covered by the state BEPS. What are some programs at MEA that could potentially help you get into compliance? So first program, the Commercial, Industrial, and Agricultural Grant Program. Just one note on this: don't let those three words kind of scare you. Like we fund nonprofit buildings, we fund public buildings, we fund manufacturing buildings. Like I think the commercial, industrial, and agricultural is a bit too I don't know, I can't think of the word, but it's much broader than that. So anyhow, I'd consider this our flagship energy efficiency grant program. This program will help defray the cost of energy efficiency and of electrification improvements. The electrification, sort of the caveat that it has to have a simple payback of 20 years, which sometimes that doesn't happen. So you'd have to find a different grant program, which I can explain in a second. Our application period just closed 2 weeks ago. But this year, just as an example, we had 3 million for projects. We'll fund projects in both new construction and existing facilities. Just note that if it's a new construction project, the proposal must prove that the suggested improvements are resulting in energy performance that exceeds current codes or standards. So we're not going to fund a project that's just meeting, Maryland's bare minimum energy efficiency code. Again, I'm going to hammer this home a few times, but that funding opportunity announcement is going to tell you everything you would need to know. But some examples of the types of measures we funded this year were expenses attributable to the upgrade of electrical infrastructure. So like service panel upgrades, if a project was looking to electrify, HVAC and refrigeration systems, lighting and controls, energy audits, but only if the measures recommended in the audit were actually installed. And again, remember that we pay funding in arrears, so we would look and then pay you afterwards. High efficiency electric motors, variable frequency drives, improvements to the building shell, and retro commissioning. And that's a non-exhaustive list, but just to kind of give you a flavor. And for this program, historically, we'll fund up to, so keyword up to 85% of the costs. Sometimes it could be lower, it could be, 70. So a grantee would need to find, a 25% cost share. Secondly, I'm really excited about this second one. So Electrifying Community Buildings Grant Program. This is a brand new program, and it's the first program in MEA's history that focuses entirely on electrification of buildings. And this program it's a pilot program where we've been requested by the governor himself to launch this program for 2 fiscal years, kind of beta tested, if you will. And the governor said he wanted us to focus on a specific building type. He called it community buildings, and we decided that a community building is a building whose purpose is to serve the public. So houses of worship are indeed eligible. Just gonna rhyme off some other buildings. If you're happen to be chatting with friends or other colleagues, private K through 12 schools, nonprofits, community-based organizations, universities and colleges, local governments are also eligible for this program. This year, so in fiscal year 25, we've got 9 million to distribute. We'll be, like I said, it's going to be a 2-year program. So in a year, we'll be releasing another 9 million. Applications are still open for this year, but that's a pretty short turnaround. But yeah, keep it in mind for next year. Again, I think I want folks' takeaway from tonight to be focused on benchmarking today. We can do funding and financing tomorrow. But like the CINA program, this grant program also requires applicants to cost share. And this one was actually, we're only funding up to 50%. So we require applicants to demonstrate that they can foot that other 50%, and we're here at MEA to help you think of creative ways to do that. So funding with Empower rebates, low interest loans, CPACE, et cetera. And I'll get into examples of those in a second. And then kind of rounding out the energy efficiency and electrification portion, I just described 2 grant programs. So grants, as we know, is free money. But I've mentioned in both cases, MEA does not fund the entirety of the project. So we do have a loan program at MEA to kind of as a to help folks round out their cost share if they so choose. So nonprofits are eligible for the Janie Lawton loan. The eligible measures basically mirror those of that commercial, industrial, and agricultural grant program. They're intended to be sister programs, if you will. And we encourage folks to stack them should they want to. For nonprofit facilities, and I'm using nonprofit kind of as a blanket term, but I do mean houses of worship when I say nonprofit. Our interest rate is 2%, so far below kind of market interest rate, from my knowledge. And yeah, the deadline is always much late. Every year it's much later than the CINA grant, for example, to kind of give folks an opportunity. Okay, I'll apply to the CINA grant, see if I get accepted, and then if they need the, 20% covered, they can then apply for the loans. That's kind of how we waterfall it, if you will. So this slide, stole it from a colleague. It generally sketches out the types of projects that MEA will and will not fund. Again, gonna caveat this by saying that if you're applying for an MEA grant, absolutely critical. I think this is the third time I've said it so far. Absolutely critical that you read the funding opportunity announcement. That's going to detail minimum and preferred criteria. But generally, I do want folks to know that we do not fund at this moment fossil fuel assets or investments that meet minimum codes or standards. You also, and I don't think this would be an issue with this crowd, but you can't use our funding for startup or venture capital. ME's program managers do, require reports from grantees afterwards to ensure that funds are being used as intended. Take a water break. Again, stole this slide from that same coworker, but I thought this was kind of a nice checklist of how you could kind of cobble together your funding, I don't know, strategy. So obtain an energy audit or feasibility study, kind of research and apply for utility rebates. And maybe this was out of order. I'll get into utility rebates in a second. Apply for an MEA grant, and then if you want, apply for an MEA loan or a loan from a different entity. And again, I'm going to kind of get into details on other entities in a second. Oh, oops. So going beyond on-site greenhouse gas emissions reductions, this is what I call BEPS extra credit because as Sam mentioned, as the BEPS legislation is written right now, on-site renewable, like if you've got a gas burning furnace and you also have a, on-site solar panels, like your solar panels right now will not cancel out your gas burning furnace. But I did just want to take a moment to let you know about renewable programs that we have at MEA. So I like to use resilience as a framing principle for folks to consider, especially kind of if I'm talking to the business community. So even if you or your board members or whomever else is involved in decision making doesn't necessarily care about emissions reductions, there are other valuable benefits to pursuing improvements to buildings beyond emissions. So resilience is the ability to, and I'm reading a definition right now, prepare for, plan for, absorb, recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. So resilience, it's not one single technology or measure. I encourage folks to think of it as a spectrum or kind of continuum. So buildings resilience can be improved through measures like deep energy efficiency, so meaning your building is using less energy if you've been cut off the grid during a storm. on-site renewables, and technologies like a microgrid that can help your building island from the main grid. Again, kind of thinking of a hurricane or natural disaster when the main grid may be down. So, Resilient Maryland is, I think it is one of the coolest programs we have at MEA. It provides grants for local governments and organizations, kind of specific, more so like nonprofits, to help make their energy more reliable and resilient to grid outages. Again, sorry, reading that off the funding opportunity announcement. So we'll help fund plans for resilient energy systems like microgrids, resiliency hubs, which is a neat concept. So resiliency hub is a kind of a familiar, easily accessible location in a community. Places of worship are often designated resiliency hubs. Community centers, libraries are other ones where residents congregate or can congregate during power outages and other emergency events. So they can charge phones, other devices to remain connected in the event of a grid outage, refrigerate temperature sensitive items, receive power for medical equipment. Basically, just it's a space that is safe and has the lights on during a disaster. So funding for fiscal year 25 has closed, but do keep this program in mind for years to come. Our grants typically range from 12,000 to 1.5 million for resiliency hubs and microgrids, depending on a project's complexity. Secondly, to kind of solar programs, solar canopy and dual use technology program. Nonprofits and faith-based organizations are eligible. We'll provide grants to defray the cost of installing parking lot solar canopies. And the canopies must have a dual use. So I think one of the most common dual uses would be providing shelter to cars or having a EV charging infrastructure kind of packaged in. And then finally, again, the commercial I find for this last program is a bit of a misnomer. Commercial entities are not only eligible. We will fund local governments, nonprofits, other entity types with the solar grant program. Application window is actually still open, but we'll defray the cost of on-site solar PV. So I also wanted to call out some other funding and financing mechanisms that can be stacked with MEA's offerings. I've been talking a lot about these, but haven't actually explained what they are. I'm using the wrong slides. This was much longer, but moving on. These are by no means the only sources you can leverage. And I wanted this to just be kind of a taste of what's available. We at MEA are here to help you wade through these and figure out what you're eligible for. So kind of first and foremost, and perhaps most importantly, get to know your utilities and power offerings. So if your building is in the service territories of PEPCO, BG&E, Potomac Edison, Washington Gas, or SMECO, Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, you are paying into this program. You're paying for it. There's a charge on your energy bill each month, which means you are eligible for energy efficient and electric equipment and appliance rebates and other means of assistance like technical assistance. Kind of just brief policy history. Last spring, the Maryland General Assembly enacted a law which made updates to the original Empower legislation, which was passed back in, I think, 2007. So this update to the law now requires utilities to add incentives to help Marylanders switch from fossil fuel powered appliances and equipment to electric alternatives. So basically, now these utilities are required to provide incentives for heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, etc., which is really exciting. There is one one Empower program that I wanted to call out for this audience. So both BG&E and Delmarva Power offer what's known as the Energy Efficient Communities Program. Um, so local governments and nonprofits, and they do call out religious organizations as being eligible, can receive technical assistance in developing kind of a decarbonization implementation plan. They also offer complimentary registration to an operations and maintenance training course, and locked-in incentive rates. So it's my understanding that the incentive rates are lower than sort of, the incentive rates that they would give to a commercial building. So, eligible projects could be lighting, chillers, HVAC, building envelope, control systems, etc. So, kind of one example of a neat Empower program that you could leverage. Also wanted to plug the Maryland Clean Energy Center. It's Maryland's green bank. A lot of folks don't know we have a green bank in Maryland. They provide low interest financing as well as property assessed clean energy PACE, which is a way of financing clean energy improvements through a lien on your property tax. And I'm happy to facilitate introductions to folks over there if that's of interest to kind of walk through financing options. And then, this is where I'm mad I'm using the wrong slide deck. We also have a second green bank here in Maryland. Montgomery County has their own green bank. So you're only eligible to leverage Montgomery County Green Bank if your building is located there. But they also provide low interest financing as well as a super neat technical assistance program that I quickly wanted to plug. Sorry, water break. Montgomery County's TA program is open to any building in Montgomery County that is not a single family home. And it's meant to help buildings plan for decarbonization. So they'll subsidize up to 75% of the cost of things like decarbonization studies, feasibility studies. So for example, like a solar panel feasibility study or an electrification feasibility study, investor grade audits, which is really great because those can be expensive, and really any other types of decarb clean energy planning. So I can provide info. Maddie, I'm assuming
Could I?
you'll send out like a package of
Yeah, I'll send out an
ideas.
email with a list of all this. I just wanted to add too on Empower, that a lot of people don't know this, but like your congregation can get a professional to come out for free and just walk through your congregation and give you ideas of like, um, what projects like to tackle first. Usually lighting is sort of the lowest hanging fruit if you haven't done an LED lighting retrofit. But sometimes, those folks can be helpful in just thinking through like, what comes next, or like a lot of people talk to me and say like our boiler's gonna go like in a year now, when we're just ready waiting for it, and then like to talk to somebody who can maybe help you put together a plan of like what to do when it does go, so that you're not replacing it with something that's gonna make it hard for you to meet these standards that we're talking about. So if
Absolutely.
that's something you're interested in, is just having somebody come out for free, please, I have contacts at all of the different Empower programs. And the BGE guy told me that there's specific money available for houses of worship to cover the lighting portion that isn't covered by the utilities. Vincenzo, did you get some of that money?
Yes, we had
Nice.
they installed all for free.
Awesome.
Yes, there's like mysterious lighting money for houses of worship that people get to use, and I don't really know where it comes from, but people are using it and it's
Yeah.
free, so it's great.
I have a
Yeah,
quick.
I'll put my email in the chat if people like want to set up a time to chat about any of this. Like, and if I don't know the answer to something, Becky probably does, like about financing and funding. And like I think, and Becky, I know you have more to say, so I'll stop in just a second. But just to like, we really want to like make sure you get access to everything that's out there and potentially available for you.
Great segue. I'm just gonna kind of skip ahead because I see we're 5 minutes to half past the hour. So yeah, you really set this up well. Kind of wanted to just plug kind of this initiative at MEA. So I think, we can all agree that there's a lot of hands involved in funding and financing building decarbon Maryland. I live and breathe this stuff, and it's confusing. It took me a year to get all the incentives straight. Um, and just in the last 30 minutes, I threw a lot at you. So the state NMEA is empathetic to that. A lot of building owners don't have the time to just sit and comb through all the incentives and then figure out, okay, well, am I eligible? What measure will this fund? Um, and we want to make it easier for building owners like yourselves to access what you need to get started. So again, kind of a little policy history. The same policymakers that passed the BEPS policy 2 years ago also included a line in the legislation um, mandating the creation of an initiative called the Maryland Clean Buildings Hub. And they said it had to be housed within the Maryland Energy Administration, designed to provide information and resources to owners seeking to decarbonize their buildings. So really what we interpreted that to mean was we want at MEA to empower building owners, give them the information, resources, and funding and financing they need to become highly energy efficient and eliminate on-site fossil fuel usage. We can't provide hardline recommendations on what to do. MEA is not going to come out to your building and do an audit ourselves and tell you that you need to replace your boiler with a heat pump and do this to your envelope. But we do want to kind of, what I'd like to say is take the administrative burden off of you and do the research on funding and financing for you. So I sort of use the phrase first mile of assistance to explain that. So I think first and foremost, the crux of what we do is connecting you to funding and financing. And we're going to work with Maddie on this and with partners all over the state. And we're just another resource. So it's our job to understand the incentives on the federal level, state, utility, and local levels, help you understand what you're eligible to receive. Right now, we don't have the capacity to, and I don't even think it's legal for us to apply on a building's behalf, but we can let you know your options. So if we know that you are a nonprofit based in, I don't know, Montgomery County or in Frederick County, we can say, hey, based on our research, you should look into these, this grant program, this rebate program, this, low interest financing option. You can email us directly, and I'll put this in the chat once I'm done speaking. And again, I'll put the sign up in the chat. I also highly encourage you sign up for our newsletter. That comes out monthly, and that compiles kind of the relevant policy updates. So for example, if there's a change to the state BEPS or change to, empowers underlying legislation in the future, that would be in there, as well as all those juicy funding and financing opportunities, as well as educational opportunities. Segueing into, we want to be a convener. So hosting events, as well as uplifting events that nonprofits, other, utilities, whomever are having that is relevant, cross-pollinating, just making sure that folks know that resources exist. And really, I like the peer-to-peer learning opportunities kind of model of convening or education. So getting folks that maybe represent one type of building in a room, maybe that's a Zoom room together, talking through their challenges, sharing how they're approaching retrofits, etc. And then lastly, I sort of say buildings are somewhat facetiously, but like I said at the way beginning of my presentation, our programs over at MEA are dynamic. So we're here to listen to market feedback and adjust our programs year over year. So just one kind of relevant example, is the fact that we've heard from stakeholders that there's not enough technical assistance in Maryland. So for example, buildings subject to the BEPS need help with benchmarking. Obviously, Maddie's doing as much as she can, but we've got thousands upon thousands of buildings in the state. We also hear a lot of folks need help just crafting like a retrofit plan. Like a lot of these retrofit projects are not going to happen in 1 year. It's going to be maybe you do one measure, a set of measures in 2030, and then you do a few more in 2032, and maybe you do your last bit in 2035. So kind of working with someone to craft a retrofit plan. So all that said, we've taken that feedback from the market. We hear folks loud and clear, and we're now starting to put pen to paper and crafting a pilot sort of technical assistance program that we're hoping to launch by Q4, which then would be iterated, refined, improved each successive year. So we would start with, candidly, a smaller group of buildings and then expand year on year. But I, yeah, do want folks to know that that's kind of where we're going in the future. And I'm 1 minute past the half hour. I'll skip ahead. Again, I'll drop these things in the chat, but want to reiterate how you can connect with us directly emailing us. We will answer. Newsletter sign up. I'll throw that in the chat. And then we've got pages on the MDE website. We actually have a page. We've got pages dedicated to every building type with a list of incentives that we know of that you're eligible for. Obviously, as I've come to learn, there's always hidden pots of money. So this hidden lighting funds was news to me. So yeah, know that we're all still learning too. But okay, I really need more water. My voice is fried.
Yeah, thank you so much, Becky. I know we're just about at time, but I want to I can stay on for a few minutes to answer questions if people have them. Um, maybe Becky and Sam, if you could put your emails in the chat just so people have them too. And yeah, like I look forward to working with you all on this and please be in touch as you both work on the benchmarking, but also think about, any projects you want to do in your buildings.
Well,
Any questions that
yeah, I
folks
do have
have?
a
Yeah.
question. So I do have a question. For example, if our church wants to replace the roof, will that be included in one of the grants? Is something or in financing or yeah?
For roofs, potentially if you were looking at a solar project,
Yeah.
roofs might be an eligible measure, but if you were just doing like a energy efficiency electrification retrofit, that would not be, we would not be able to fund that, and I don't know anyone else who would. Um,
Yeah, we are thinking about a roof that is energy efficient to install that and then put, the solar panel on top. So we read the IRS, directions, and seems like that, I mean, you can have the 30% just on the solar. It's not that clear on the roofing. So this, I mean, if you have like a roof that is energy efficient, maybe you would be able to have some, but it's not totally clear. So even though,
Yeah, that's a
the
good
companies that
question,
yeah.
Vincenzo. My understanding is that the roof and like replacing your roof in order to go solar, that does not count as part of the federal tax credit. I will say, so the Montgomery County Green Bank and Maryland Clean Energy Center are working together on a big pot of federal money that is currently half frozen, unclear.
Okay.
It's like the money is not in the government accounts anymore, but they also can't use it yet. You may have heard about the clawback of the Green Bank money. My
Mhm.
understanding is that some of that money can be used to help replace roofs in order to help people go solar.
So
So,
then, so maybe we
like
can put
that,
some, yeah.
I'm hoping that that will become available and that they won't be able to claw back all of it. We have weekly, and the Montgomery County Green Bank is sort of administering those funds for the whole state.
Okay,
And so we would check in weekly with them, and I'm getting updates on like
that's
how
good.
if that program is going to move forward or not. So
Okay.
that's something we could look at.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, because like the problem is like, getting a loan from a commercial bank to like cover both solar and the roof, like does not always make sense.
No, it's
I
not. Yeah.
know for roofs, sometimes folks will go to a denominational loan fund. I don't know, like, but obviously that's not accessible to everyone necessarily either if you don't have one for your denomination or if you're non-denominational. Um, and then, sometimes I also, because I try to think creatively with people about roof replacements, because we run into this a lot. Sometimes a roof replacement or part of it could be folded into the cost of a power purchase agreement, depending on
Mhm.
for solar. But if you want to own your solar, and get the most
Yes.
benefits from it, that's a little bit of a different story. So, yeah, let's be in touch. I
Yeah.
I hope that we could
Yeah,
figure
because
something out.
companies are
Yeah.
telling us if you have one bill, roof and solar together, so you'll be able to do that. But we are not that sure, so we don't want to find ourselves in.
Yeah, that makes me nervous that they're telling you that, to be honest.
Yeah, that is that. There's
Um, Actually, and will send out information about this, but we're actually holding a webinar in a few weeks about direct pay, which is the
okay,
30%
great.
tax credit for houses of worship. We're part of a greater network around the country called the Interfaith Power and Light Network. And so, we're telling people like if you want to use this federal tax credit and you want to do solar or geothermal, like 2025 is the year to do it. And so we're gonna have some experts there.
Okay,
And yeah, you would be more than welcome to come, and I'll make sure I send information out about
okay,
that.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, any last things before we hop off and say goodnight? Okay, well, thank you
I'll just
everyone.
say that, this is a years long process and we're with you guys for years, not just this night. So I don't know, it's kind of cheesy, but
Thank you.
this was just the intro course and, we'll help you all the way until 2040.
Yep, exactly. And I'll send out a follow-up email to everyone with the recording. If Sam and Becky can share a version of your slides, like we can include
Yeah.
those too. Um, and then, please do be in touch if you want to talk through any of this stuff. Like that's what I'm here for, is like most of my week I spend meeting with different congregations. So would be happy to, yeah, always chat with you. And thank you, Sam and Becky, for being here tonight and for your help.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us. And yeah, please reach out with any questions. And yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah.
And hope we can speak to everyone again, in the future. As Becky said, this is a long program and we'll be here throughout it. So
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Take good care and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night.